It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
A victorious Rico Brogna podcast, a much-needed victory, a happy edition of Rico Brogna as the New York Mets fly to St. Louis, Missouri, and they take care of business. A nice, stress-free, dominant 6-0 victory over the St. Louis Cardinals. A much-needed victory. If you listen to the last Rico, you know I looked at this game, especially after losing 2 out of 3 to the Angels, and said, this is a big one, not just because of the tiebreaker, not just because of the standing situation with St. Louis, which we'll get into, but really to just kind of stop the bleeding of what potentially could have been built from losing 2 out of 3 to the Anaheim Angels. This is a team, to their credit, that has responded. They responded from 0-5. They responded from a terrible May. They've responded from some of the more recent challenges, losing those 2 games to Houston, losing the last 2 games to Atlanta. And I certainly think this game in particular against a quality opponent, a peer-tier team as we call them, was a very, very important victory. Before we get to the game, I recorded a Rico last night that was outside. You may have heard it through the wind that was blowing through the air. I didn't realize the way it sounded, but that was not my biggest issue. My biggest issue was I record the Rico. I have a laptop. I have my scorebook. I have my tablet. Broadcast is over. I thought I brought everything in from the deck where I was recording here on vacation in North Carolina. I found out, much to my chagrin, earlier this morning that I didn't bring everything in from the deck. My laptop was brought in. That's good. You know, it's a valuable piece of equipment. God knows the damage that could be caused when there's rain at night. And yes, there was rain at night. So my laptop was fine, Pete. My iPad, completely fine. Brought that in. My phone, completely fine. The look on my face when I woke up this morning and saw my lovely, beautiful scorebook sitting outside after a torrential rainstorm, my stomach dropped. But this is why I married so well. My wife spent all day today air drying that scorebook, page by page, blowing that scorebook with air to make sure that it would dry up. And so the results are not pretty. It has survived. I just want to say the book is not dead. I was able to successfully score tonight's game between the Mets and the Cardinals. But Pete, I wasn't even drunk. And I left my little baby, my scorebook, outside to get rained on all night. What a schmuck.
Dude, that's called true love. She every single page she air dried?
She tried to. I mean, there were it's a dicey situation. I'm not gonna lie to you, but yeah, she tried to kind of, because I was devastated. I'm not even kidding. When I woke up this morning, and I noticed this, and I brought it back inside. I quickly ran up to my wife. I put my arm around her, and I said, honey, I did something very bad. And she actually confessed a little bit later. She thought I murdered somebody. She was like, the way you said I did something really bad, I was concerned you killed somebody. I said, no. And I explained I left my scorebook outside. I was very devastated. I didn't cry, but I was close to crying. And I think she saw the pain. She knows how much I care about the book. She knows I just published an effing book. It's my scorecard. So obviously I care deeply about it. And she has done her best job to try to salvage it, yes, by air drying many of the pages. It is a tricky situation. It's a sticky situation. But it will survive, Pete. It will survive.
But you brought everything else in. How is that the one thing that you left outside?
I still can't figure it out. And it wasn't even a drunken Rico. Like, if it was a drunken Rico, I'd say, yeah, you know what? I had too many pina coladas and somehow I left my book outside. I have no idea how I did it. And it's funny. My first concern, here's how my brain worked when I checked out the pages. My first concern was, can I score tonight's game? That was my first concern. Like, is this book going to be doable to take care of Mets Cardinals, take care of the rest of the series? Like, where does that stand? My second concern, which shows you how much fun I had writing my Mets Bible, I started thinking, are there games from this year that would make my Mets Bible too? And is it going to be too smeared from the rain? My answer is I don't know yet. Like, I think if the Mets win the World Series, there are going to be a lot of these games that probably make my Mets viable. Or if they go on even a deep postseason run, if this turns out to be like 2019 all over again, where they don't make the playoffs, I don't know. Maybe there's a game. But I was able to score today's game. I do not have the scorebook with me right now because I'm still air drying it. But I did take a picture of the scorecard from tonight's game. So this is the way it looks if you're watching on YouTube. It's not bad. Like, it looks okay when you take a picture of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, from that angle, yes, because you probably can't see the wrinkles and creases and dampness.
You know what's so funny, man? And we'll get to the game, I promise. I'm sorry. This was a personal story I needed to share. Scorebooks are not perfect. Like, there are rain when you go to baseball games. And so I do have like markings from the history of scoring all these games where there's a rain mark. I even have mustard marks. Like, literally, you go to a baseball game, things are going to happen. And I've never really had a big issue with it. As much as I try to protect my scorecard, it's always like, hey, that's kind of like, that's what happens in the battle. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it rains. Yes, the Robin Ventura Grand Slam single, that scorecard is going to be a little bit kind of greasy because it was a freaking 15-inning game in the rain for 5.5 hours. Like, it's only natural. But when it doesn't involve like being at the game, then those conditions bother me. Like, if I drop a bottle of wine on my scorecard while I'm on vacation, that'll bother me a hell of a lot more than like a beer stain from a baseball game because it kind of happens. So my wife tried to talk me and say, look, you'll always have the memory. You'll have the memory of all of those 2024 games are wet and disgusting because of the stupid thing you did in North Carolina. But I've survived.
Yeah. Yeah, after they lost a 3-game series to the freaking Angels. I mean, could it have been better? Like, could it have been after a no-hitter, after something else? And
well,
have you ever thought about like a situation like, I mean, this is being serious now. I know how much you love your scorecards. Have you had emergency scorecards in case of you losing it?
Never. I've never had one. What's funny is the moment after I rescued the scorebook, I went on Bob Carpenter's website and bought another scorebook for this season because my expectation was, I don't know what I'm going to do. So now, for the first time ever, Pete, I do have an extra scorebook. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. Like, I may try to stay true to 2024 and just finish out the season in this kind of moist, crunchy scorebook. In fact, I asked the people, what do you think I should do? Should I begin anew when I get home from North Carolina with a brand new, fresh scorebook and kind of have a stretch drive on beautiful, pristine pages? Or do I stay true to 2024 and say, look, this was a part of the season? I mean, part of the season was somehow having your scorebook stay out on a rainy deck in North Carolina right before we got hit by a hurricane.
If this is a World Series year, you could freaking you could put this up in a shrine somewhere, dude. Like this is the scorecard, and look at the damage it took. We went to war in 2024, and so did Evan.
That reasoning is why I lean towards just maintaining this book for the rest of the year, and not like changing it to a nice fresh book for the middle of August through the end of the season. But that's where I stand now. I was able to score this wonderful Monday night game. It wasn't easy, but I was able to do it. And let's start with, before I even get to Sean Manaea, who I think is obvious. Obviously, Sean Manaea delivered another incredible performance. He's now pitched back-to-back dominant performances. I read a stat, and this was unbelievable. And I apologize for who put it out there for the first time because I don't know who to give credit to. But that Sean Manaea joins only Doc Gooden and Tom Seaver in terms of having back-to-back starts in which they pitched 7 scoreless innings and strike out 10 guys. I think that was the official stat. Let me read it. Okay, Sean Manaea joins Tom Seaver and Doc Gooden as the only pitchers in Mets history with 7+ innings, 10+ strikeouts, and no runs allowed in consecutive starts. There are 2 mind-boggling things about this. Number one, Sean Manaea has joined this kind of illustrious list. The other thing was the surprise that DeGrom didn't do it. Like, for everything that Jake accomplished in some of his dominant years with this team, it's amazing he didn't do that. But Doc Gooden, Tom Seaver, Sean Manaea, which is unbelievable. So we'll get to his great performance, but I think what was so important especially in terms of the struggles that this Met team has faced since the All-Star break, was getting that big hit. First inning against Andre Pallante, they do nothing. They go down 1-2-3 very meekly. They have a little bit of a rally in the second inning when Pete Alonso draws that 4-pitch walk. And yeah, we will get to the lineup change and some more about Pete Alonso. And they have this golden opportunity. McNeil almost bounces into a double play. They get a wild pitch, so they get kind of a gift runner in scoring position. And Francisco Alvarez, actually, the wild pitch is what gave him the run. And it felt very cheap and dirty. Like, hey, I'm glad we got a run, but can this team get a big hit? And Francisco Alvarez ends up grounding out weakly. So they do get a run, but they're still lacking that big hit. And sometimes one big hit can kind of open up the floodgates. And I certainly hope that Harrison Bader, who deserves a lot of credit because all year long he's been one of their most reliable clutch hitters. I thought the RBI double that he got in the fifth inning was huge. They have a 1-0 lead. Manaea looks great, but he's even had to get his way in and out of some trouble. They still needed that big hit. It never felt, despite them ending up shutting St. Louis out, that they were going to be able to win this game 1-0 or 2-0. They needed big hits. And Harrison Bader, batting ninth in the order, 2 on, 1 out in the fifth inning. I thought that RBI double was huge. And then, to their credit, they were able to build it and make it an even bigger inning. I didn't like Tyrone Taylor batting second. I didn't like that lineup decision by Carlos Mendoza, but the reality is the biggest spot of the game, bases loaded, 1 out, found Tyrone Taylor. And Tyrone Taylor, behind in the count, which is the other impressive thing, is able to rip that bases clearing double, which was the huge kind of sigh of relief if you were watching this game. That huge moment of, okay, we're going to win it. Turns a 1-0 game into a 4-0 game. You get the Jeff McNeil home run an inning later, but those 2 at-bats, the Bader RBI double, the Tyrone Taylor 3-run double, you hope this leads to maybe this team being a little bit more relaxed at the plate with runners in scoring position. It's been a real struggle, really, since the All-Star break. They've had their moments, like the Minnesota game where they scored 15 runs. But for the most part, we went through all the numbers on the last Rico. It's been a real kind of slog coming out of the break, really including everybody. So Bader's double, Tyrone Taylor clearing the bases with a 3-run double, absolutely huge. Chasing Pallante out of the game, giving Sean Manaea the huge lead that he was never going to look back on. Why I didn't like the lineup. And it worked. Look, it worked. The Mets went out and they scored 6 runs, right? 6 runs, 9 hits. They got the 2 big hits with runners in scoring position. Obviously, the biggest spot found Tyrone Taylor. So no denying it worked. I didn't mind bouncing everyone down a slot. Like, I wouldn't have done it. I said it yesterday on the Rico. I would have kind of kept this lineup the same and just said, you know what? Guys are going to start hitting. And who knows? If you kept the lineup the same, did the Mets go out and score 5 or 6 runs today? Maybe, probably. I mean, Harrison Bader still gets a big hit. Maybe that bases loaded spot finds Brandon Nimmo instead of Tyrone Taylor. Brandon Nimmo did take an 0-for in this game, so you never know. But I don't mind, if you're going to change the lineup, to do what he did, which is put someone in the 2-hole and then move everybody down a slot. Brandon Nimmo has not played well in the 3-hole, but I do wonder sometimes, like, was Brandon Nimmo really struggling because he was batting third earlier this season? Right now he's been slumping and he's been batting second. So it's not as if like batting second was the magic elixir during this real slump he's been in coming out of the All-Star break. So I didn't even mind that. What I minded was Taylor being the guy. And I know that sounds weird considering he just got the 3-run double, but I'm being honest with you. I mean, it's Tyrone Taylor. The guy's hitting 235 this season. If you're going to do what Mendy did, and you're going to sit Mark Vientos, which he did, maybe thinking, let me give him kind of like a mental break day after that big double play the other night. The guy to bat second was Jose Iglesias. And the other guy, by the way, I was thinking about, and this sounds crazy too, is actually Francisco Alvarez, thinking maybe batting Alvarez second and giving him the protection of Lindor ahead of him and Nimmo behind him can actually get him going. Bobby Valentine used to do that a lot back in the day where a guy is slumping and you actually use the 2-hole to try to get a guy going. So when I saw the lineup and I saw the changes Mendy made, first of all, I commend him for trying. Again, I wouldn't have done it, but Carlos Mendoza has shown us that he's not afraid to shake the lineup up. Even a couple of days of struggling is enough for him to say, hey, let me try something different. That's not something we're really used to. So I do commend him for that. But when I saw the lineup, that was my first thought, which is I'm good with pushing everybody down a slot. Nimmo 3, JD 4, Pete Alonso 5. But Tyrone Taylor as the 2-hitter didn't really fit. If Jesse Winker was in the lineup, which he chose not to do because of the reverse splits of Pallante, he could have batted second. So I'm being honest, like it worked, and I'm thrilled it worked because, like I've always said, I'd rather be wrong and happy than right and miserable. But I absolutely disagreed with Tyrone Taylor batting second around that logic. And I wouldn't continue it. Like, I know this worked. And if you want to keep kind of this Lindor 1, which clearly he needs to stay at, but Nimmo 3, JD 4, Pete 5, cool. I think you've got to look at Mark Vientos batting second, which is an interesting little wrinkle if you want to try that with him back in the lineup. Jose Iglesias batting second, even Jeff McNeil batting second. Like, I think they've got some intriguing options to bat number 2 if they want to continue this. And I kind of have a feeling he will. Like, it worked. They scored 6 runs. JD Martinez didn't exactly wake up. He took another over, struck out a couple of times. Pete Alonso, like, did he really wake up? He did draw the 4-pitch walk. He had that bloop single that he tried to stretch into a double. So it's funny. Those guys, Nimmo, JD, and Pete, they didn't hit. So it's not as if it got them going. But if you do want to continue that, I think I'm trying to think how I'd power rank it. I'd probably say, because I don't think Iglesias necessarily is going to be in the lineup every day. And look, he had another hit today, but he has cooled off a little bit. And with the emergence of Jesse Winker after the trade, like we've seen a lot more of Winker in right field, McNeil at second. I think we'd all agree that McNeil deserves these opportunities. Looking ahead, they are they're pitching a lefty tomorrow, the Colorado Rockies. So you got a lefty in Kyle Freeland, which does open up the opportunity for Jose Iglesias or Tyrone Taylor, though I hope it's not Tyrone Taylor, despite the 3-run double. They are facing a righty on Wednesday and then another lefty on Thursday. So they're actually facing 2 lefties in Kyle Freeland and Austin Gomber in this Colorado series. So, yeah, I think based on that, I would power rank it if Iglesias plays Iglesias. If Iglesias doesn't play, I'd consider Mark Vientos in the 2-hole. That would be where I'd go if he wants to kind of keep this trend going. But again, it didn't exactly get Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, and JT Martinez hot. Now to Minaya. He was great, man. I mean, he was unbelievable. What was so impressive is that early in this game, he had some moments of big pitches he needed to make. He gives up that double to Nolan Arenado, needs to get Burleson out, needs to get Donovan out in the second inning. He does. He gives up a leadoff hit in the third inning, gives up a 2-out single to Tommy Pham, who I thought was going to kill him in this game. Luckily, he didn't. Gets the big strikeout of Wilson Contreras, puts 2 guys on in the 4th inning, gets the big strikeout of the catcher, Rod Podges, I think is his name. So Minaya did a great job of not just like you look at the line and you see domination, and he certainly got a lot of swing and misses, and he didn't walk anybody, which is great. But he had to make big pitches early in this game before the Mets broke it open. They didn't break it open until the 5th inning. And the first 4 innings of this game, he was able to make big pitches against St. Louis and really all night long. Even after Lindor made that error in the 7th inning, which was a bad one, but it happens. Minaya very calmly gets that last out, gives him 7 innings. He's pitching great. He really is. These last 2 starts have been ultra dominant, and it kind of varies throughout the season on which starting pitcher you have the most confidence in. I think earlier this season it was Luis Severino. There was a period of time in which you started to believe in Jose Quintana. Right now, the ace of the New York Mets, if you had to pick an ace, is Sean Manaea. His next start will be Saturday in Seattle, so that'll certainly be a test against a quality team. But great performance by Minaya. Good to see Edwin Diaz at least get into a game. It seems like we never see him pitch. Ryan Stanek did pretty well. Did walk a guy, got the double play in his 1 inning of work. I'm glad they didn't, just waste Jose Butto in this game. But a really good, clean victory by this team. Not a lot of stress other than the first few innings when the Cardinals had opportunities. Very important win. They get the tiebreaker on St. Louis. They open up a 3-game loss column lead on St. Louis, but it's really bigger because of the tiebreaker. And by the way, I did confirm something I surmised on last night's Rico, which is if you split a season series against the team, the next tiebreaker is your record inside your division, which doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're tied with a team that's not in your division, just for the record, Mets have a quality division record. They're 20-16. So could be helpful down the road as far as future tiebreakers are concerned. Now let's address Pete Alonso. I feel like I have to remind everybody, I love Pete Alonso. Pete's my guy. I grew a beard for Pete Alonso. I still hope that Pete Alonso can be a long-term member of the New York Mets. But I heard what I think a lot of people listening heard. And if you didn't hear it, we're going to play it for you right now. Pete was asked before this game against St. Louis, basically about his struggles and basically about, hey, hey, Pete, what's been the problem this season? And his answer has ruffled a lot of feathers. So let's take a listen to Pete Alonso's response on his down season that he's having.
It's true that numbers are not quite where they usually are. Just is there anything you can put a finger on of why you haven't fully been able to come around, do you think?
I mean, I think I'm in a position where I'm on pace for close to 40 homers. I'm an all-star, so I was an all-star this year, so I think that to beat myself up or be frustrated, it's really no use. And I'm really excited for the end of the year where we get to play winning baseball. So I'm really excited. I'm happy with what I've accomplished this year so far, and I think that there's definitely going to be some opportunities that I'm looking forward to capitalizing on.
So I say this with peace and love to Pete Alonso. This was a horrible answer. Horrible answer. It's one of those answers that's going to cause people that don't like Pete Alonso to get all the red meat that they can find, and deservedly so, because Pete said a few things in this answer that he shouldn't have said. Now, I get it. He's getting defensive. He's a major league athlete. He's a professional athlete, and he doesn't want to admit that he's having a shitty season. Okay? He doesn't want to admit. See, I'd love to ask Tiki this. I'm on vacation, so I'm not going to bother him with this. But when you're not playing well, or at least I think when you're not playing well. And I guess that's the question for the professional athlete. Like, do you not realize what's happening? Like, are you so proud concerning what you do that you won't admit, hey, this isn't my best season? So a couple of things. First of all, do not cite that you were an all-star, Pete. I love you, but do not cite you were an all-star, because I know everybody listening knows, and I would think deep down that you are not deserving of being an all-star. That doesn't mean you've never been deserving of being an all-star. It doesn't mean you suck. It doesn't mean you're a bad guy. But do not, I'm saying this for your own good, do not insult our intelligence by telling us, gee, I'm an all-star. You didn't deserve to be an all-star. There were two Mets, and I think you know this, that clearly should have been all-stars above you. That's number one. Number two, never cite your stats. And by the way, if you're going to cite your stats, be accurate about it. You're not on pace for 40 home runs. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Pete Alonso was on pace, if you want to play the pace game, of hitting 33 home runs. 33, which for you sucks. I'm sorry. You've set a very high bar. 33 home runs from Pete Alonso is not a great year. But still, why cite your numbers? That was a very defensive answer by Pete, and it feeds the narrative. I'm not even saying it's true, but it feeds the narrative that a lot of people listening may have, and a lot of people who are Met fans may have, that you're selfish. Because when you're asked, I'll give you the proper answer, by the way, for the next time. And I think this answer would go over well with everybody. You guys tell me if I'm wrong. The next time you're asked about having a down season, or, hey, can you put your finger on it? I think the answer would be, well, first of all, we're 6 games above 500. I guess at the time of this, 5 games above 500. And I'm really happy we're winning games. So you always put your team first. And then you say, look, we've been struggling to get big hits. That's been my problem all year. And I just have to be better. Bang. That's it. You don't have to die on the sword. You don't have to say you suck. You don't even have to give a real baseball reason for why you're struggling. But that answer is defensive. It's a defensive answer, and it makes you look bad. And look, it doesn't mean you're that kind of guy. Because I want to share a story with you guys. I want to share a real story with you guys about a player that we all love, a player that's beloved in Met history, but a guy who said something to me and Joe once, and I was like, I don't know if you should have said that. And the guy I'm talking about is David Wright, the great David Wright, who I love and I admire. And I think David Wright was always a team player. But it's an example how things can come out the wrong way. Beningo said to him, it was actually Joe who made the comment. He said, hey, David, you're having a whatever year, you've driven in 52 runs. Joe gave him the stat back. And David looked at him and said, 52? Nah, I've got 54 RBIs. And I remember us looking at each other like, really? I mean, first of all, who cares that Beningo was wrong? But you're mad, or you just need to correct us that we're off by 1 or 2 RBIs. And I think at the time, the feeling we had, and we were wrong, by the way, but the feeling we had was, do you just care about your stats? Are you that anal about the fact that some guy on the radio was off by 1 RBI? But it's the perception of it. Now, enough time has gone by where David Wright probably didn't care that much. I mean, he cared about his stats. I think everybody cares about their stats, but he obviously cared more about winning. But sometimes things are said in a way in which they come off like you don't. And this is one of those comments where, right or wrong, Pete Alonso came across out of touch and selfish. And for the next time, be better. Now, look, Scott Boras may be a really good agent, but in this case, he's not good at explaining to his players the way they should talk. Because, and that's why, I'll tell you why I blame Scott in this. I think Pete Alonso is overthinking the contract. I think he was overthinking the contract in spring training when he was asked questions about it. It may be contributing to his struggles this year. It may. I mean, what is the answer for why his numbers with runners in scoring position are the worst in his career? Like, what's the answer to that? Like, if you think Pete's not a clutch player, you haven't been paying attention. He has been in his career. He isn't this year. This year, he hasn't. This year, his OPS is the worst it's ever been with runners in scoring position. This year, his batting average is the worst it's ever been with runners in scoring position. It's not something that happens every freaking season. So why? Well, Pete had his kind of rehearsed answers in spring training about his contract. He is struggling in these bigger spots. And here, this answer was almost like protecting his contract negotiations. And that's why I wonder, like, is he being coached by his agent on how to answer questions about him having himself a down year? Because you can't admit you're having a down year, right? When you're entering free agency and you want $175 million. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's similar to asking a president who's running for re-election, which we don't have this time, but asking a president in a re-election year, what did you screw up? Well, they're not going to tell you. No one's going to admit they screwed up because they're running for re-election, and that will be used against them in a campaign ad. Now, you're a two-termer and you're done. You could admit all your freaking mistakes. It doesn't freaking matter. So that answer reeked of an agent in his ear, making sure he doesn't make a mistake in terms of the negotiations. But fans hear it, and it's a turn-off answer. And I say that as a Pete Alonso fan. That was not a good answer to give.
I have to agree with you, Ev, and for a fact, I do know, because, like, again, I'm into MMA, and a lot of these, like, guys, they surround themselves in groups of people, whether it's agents, whether it's a team, quote unquote, with people that a sport like fighting is one where you kind of need people to always uplift you and always be the most positive. And that's what, when Alonso spoke about all his highlights, it sounded like he was surrounding himself around people that are always yesing him and like, dude, you're doing great. Look at the rest of the league. Like, and to be fair, look at his OPS. He's not having a great season. I know everyone loves OPS. His OPS is what, like 790, 791, whatever it is right now. Honestly, he's sitting at 38th overall. I mean, how many people are in the league? He's in front of Bregman. He's in front of Austin Riley. You can go through the names. So I bet they're feeding him all this stuff like, hey, dude, you're still having a great season. It's not your great season. It's not a great season for you, but you're still doing well.
Yeah, but look, when you're negotiating with David Stearns, when Scott Boras does that, you can use all of that to your advantage. when you're negotiating. When you are speaking to the media, you're speaking to Met fans. Remember that. The media is just the way to get us as fans information and quotes from players. So anytime you give an answer to Anthony DiComo or whomever, you're speaking to us. And that answer doesn't go over well. Like, you're not on pace to hit 40 home runs. No one wants to hear about how you're an all-star, and you're not having a very good season. And when we say that, I'm not saying it based on his OPS compared to everybody else. I'm not saying it based on his power numbers. I'm saying it, and this is something that's been obvious without numbers to back it up. You just can see it. He's not had a clutch year. He just hasn't. Again, I feel like I need to prep this every time. He's had clutch years for this team. He's not a non-clutch player. He just has been bad in big spots this season. So when you look at that and you look at his overall numbers, they're not as good as what they've been in the past. So don't insult our intelligence. Just now, you don't have to get into detail. Just say, yeah, I'm not having a great year, but every day I'm working hard and I'm glad we're winning games. That's it.
Okay. Okay. I hear that. But now, if I'm not Scott Boras, you're not Scott Boras. I've never really been in a real negotiation with money. You're telling me that if he goes on record, like, yeah, it's not really going well. It's not my best year, or whatever the case is. Are you telling me that won't come up in negotiations as far as like, hey, by the way, you said you didn't do well?
You know why? So when I use that analogy of an election year, and for some reason I think I remember President Bush being kind of in that spot where, hey, in your first term, what was your biggest mistake? And W, politically smart guy, I was never going to give the answer because they're used in commercial ads. They're used in ways that can get people who maybe were on the fence to vote against you, right? So it can come back and hurt you. There's no doubt about it. It's why I understand. It's, by the way, why I would have one term for president. 6 years, one term, that's it. I would never allow someone to run for re-election because of the exact reason I'm giving. Like, noble people don't want to admit when they F up because they're afraid it's going to be used against them, because it will be used against them and it will sway somebody. Okay, that's a president. That's an election. There's no way Pete Alonso giving a quote is going to change the negotiations between David Stearns and Scott Boras. You know what I mean? Like, David Stearns could bring it up. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant what you tell the people. Yeah, I'm having a down year. It doesn't mean anything. It's not the same as getting a quote from a president who says, yeah, you know what? I screwed up the Bay of Pigs. You know, it's just, it's completely different. Speaking of Pete, Kendrick, who's a great caller to the Evan and Tiki program, also a great listener to the Rico, which you appreciate, writes, Pete needs backup. Evan, I wanted to bring this up after Sunday's game, and I think it's still addressing going into this long week of travel and games. Sunday in the eighth inning, when Pete got hit, I would have pinch ran for him with Tyrone Taylor. My thought was Taylor should have been looking to steal second while Jesse Winker was up. My guess as to why he wasn't pinch run for is they don't have a backup. The notion his bat is too valuable goes out the window when you look at his stats late in game clutch spots and the today being dropped in the order. I've said this to you before being an issue and wanting Pete to get a rest day, but now it's also costing us opportunities to get better base runners on the base paths. In critical games with surely some big moments in the future, why haven't the Mets addressed the backup first baseman situation? Am I overthinking this? Please don't tell me Mark Vientos is the guy. God forbid Pete goes down with injury. We shouldn't move Mark to first base. Looking forward to a fun week of Ricos. Enjoy the vacation. Are you looking too closely into this? Well, my disagreement with you would be about Vientos. Mark Vientos is the backup first baseman. In fact, the Mets have only had two other players play first base this season outside of Pete Alonso. Mark Vientos, who I think has started 2 games at first base, or 1, whatever it is, and DJ Stewart. DJ Stewart played, I think, a combined 4 innings at first base, all clearly off the bench. DJ's not on the team. He's been optioned to AAA. Most teams aren't going to have multiple backup first basemen. If Pete did get hurt, Mark Vientos would be the first baseman. And when he's played first base, he hasn't looked particularly bad. So I don't disagree with you, or I do disagree with you about Vientos not being the option. He is the option at first base. But you are right about one thing. When you look at the construction of the roster and you look at the fact that Vientos is replaced late for defense, usually by Jose Iglesias, also pinch run for. It doesn't give you the opportunity to also pinch run for Pete Alonso. Because if you're pinch running for Pete Alonso and using Tyrone Taylor and using the example you gave, you're assuring yourself that Mark Vientos also needs to stay in a game. So you no longer have the ability to pinch run for him or take him out for defense. Now, if you're not taking him out for defense, Iglesias is still coming into the game, improving yourself at third base with, Vientos shifting over to first base. Again, we haven't seen a lot of Vientos at first base. I don't think he's been particularly bad. But I guess the way I would throw it back to you is you only have 4 spots on your bench. That's it. Like, that's the world we live in right now, where teams maximize the amount of bullpen arms that they have. If you only have 4 spots on your bench and Tyrone Taylor, assuming Winker plays, is bench spot number 1, and Jose Iglesias is bench spot number 2, and your backup catcher is bench spot number 3, sure, you could argue, well, what the hell's the point of Ben Gamel? Should Ben Gamel be down and have a backup first baseman? Remember, Ben Gamel is just merely taking the spot of Starling Marte. When Starling Marte is here, you kind of run into the same boat. Can Jesse Winker play a little first base? I don't think he has in his major league career, but it could be worth investigating, kind of like they did with DJ Stewart. I don't think it's an overall issue, though. Like, how many times do you really feel the need to pinch run for Pete Alonso? And again, if you want to, you can. It just means Mark Vientos needs to stay in the game. So I don't want to say you're overthinking it. I just don't think it's as big of an issue as you think it is. Anyhow, 3 games coming up against the Colorado Rockies. Hopefully the Mets can build off of this victory against St. Louis. Tomorrow night, or tonight, depending on when you're listening, the Tuesday game 1 of the 3-game series, it will be your annual Drunken Rico Brogna. So after the game, whatever time it ends, 12 o'clock, 12:30, Pete and I will be lubed up for you. We'll be ready to go. And I don't know what's going to happen. I'll tell you, my drink of choice is mezcal, which is this great Mexican liquor. I may mix in the drink I talked about the other night, which is taking Luigi's Ices and mixing it with vodka. But either way, Tuesday night after Mets Rockies, hopefully will be a very happy Drunken Rico. I look forward to it, Pete.
Ev, has anybody ever told you you're a man's man?
I feel like you're saying that sarcastically right now.
Yeah, just a bit. But no, listen, I'm down for it. I can't wait. I don't even know what I'm going to be drinking yet, but I'm going to make it special for all of you guys. So we'll find it out tomorrow night.
And, of course, if you want to join in on being drunk, make sure you do it responsibly. That's always the key. I will be doing it responsibly. I'll be making sure my wife takes care of our kids, and I won't be driving anywhere. So it will be responsible on my end. It'll be responsible on Pete's end. Remember, if you're ever going to have a Drunken Rico, drink responsibly.
Now, that's great. I love that little clause right there. But we do need to have like a phrase like that. If you say something multiple times, every time you say something, we should take a shot. Like every time you make a Nets reference, we should take a shot. You know what I mean?
I haven't made a Nets reference in a while.
In like 3 podcasts.
That's true. I think Nets or presidential reference, you've got to do a shot. No doubt.
That's good.
Every time I preface talking about Pete Alonso with, I love Pete Alonso, but we got to take a shot. I think that's coming up Tuesday. And then obviously we'll have a series recap after the Thursday late afternoon game. We do appreciate you listening, subscribing, and downloading another edition, a happy edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.